Great. Let us begin now. Uh, it is my great honor to welcome you to this official side event at the 59th session of the Commission on Social Development, entitled "The Role of Digital Technologies to Stop Online Sexual Exploitation of Children." I see that many representatives and members of our organizations are joining us today. Please feel free to introduce yourselves to other participants by typing your name on the chat. We welcome our panel speakers to the event. I welcome His Excellency Enrique A. Manalo, Permanent Representative of the Permanent Mission of the Philippines to the United Nations. Ambassador Per Anders Sunnison, Deputy Director General at the Swedish Ministry of Health and Social Affairs. Ms. Abby Gilgan, Policy Manager for Tackling Online Sexual Exploitation and Abuse at the United Kingdom Home Office. Mr. John Tanago, Director of International Justice Mission's Center to End Online Sexual Exploitation of Children based in Cebu, Philippines. Father Shay Cullen, founder and director of Freda Foundation, based in Angeles City, Pampanga, Philippines. Mr. Richard Percy, co-founder and executive chairman of Safe2Net. And we don't have with us Ms. Jacqueline F. Boucher, the global digital safety advocate of Microsoft. She could not join us and she apologized because it's early morning for her, but she pre-recorded a video for her presentation. And of course, we welcome Jamie Gall and Madeline, our two youth advocates who will deliver the policy recommendation. So drawing upon the theme of the 59th session of the Commission on Social Development, socially just transition towards sustainable development, the role of digital technologies on social development and well-being for all, our panelists will be addressing the role of the digital technologies to stop online sexual exploitation of children. Last week's online debates and discussion at the 59th session, all stakeholders agreed that there is a growing digital divide, that with 3.7 billion people who have no access to internet. This inequality mirrors the current state of economic and social inequalities. Along with advances of the technical digital technologies that are beneficial to people, digital technologies have also created new forms of crimes and abuse, which we must be addressing. We need urgent and critical attention to the online sexual exploitation of children on the internet. During COVID-19 lockdowns, International Justice Mission reported an increase on sexual exploitation of children. In relation to this, data from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children showed a 31% increase in the number of images, videos, and other files related to child sexual exploitation reported to them in 2020. This is from 16 million in 2019 to 21 million in 2020. Furthermore, reports that children trafficked for live streams child sexual abuse help fuel the increase. According to the Philippine Interagency Council Against Trafficking, it received 1.2 million of OSEC reports in 2020, a threefold increase from the 400,000 in 2019. At present, with the lack of technology deployed to detect live stream child sexual abuse, the extent of this serious crime cannot be fully accounted. In this side event, we invited representatives from various stakeholders to share their knowledge, expertise, and initiative to stop online sexual exploitation of children. Specifically, we want to spotlight in this panel discussion the role of technology sectors to tackle online sexual exploitation of children. We would like to hear from the governments of the Philippines, Sweden, and the United Kingdom and their initiatives to address OSEC. And we have two NGOs who will be sharing their initiatives to help children being trafficked over the internet. I now give the floor to Sister Winifred Doherty to moderate this event. Winifred, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Marvi, and welcome to everybody to this side event. I just want to make one other point to add on to what Marvi has said, and where I really was surprised to read from the UN report on trafficking, the biannual report that was published at the end of January, which has two chapters of huge relevance to this webinar. The first one has to do with children are easy targets. And secondly, it talks about traffickers using the internet as digital hunting fields. And I think this sets for us the scene with the most up-to-date information from the United Nations in Vienna, the Office of Drugs and Crime. So good morning to everybody, welcome. And without wasting any more time, it is my honor to introduce to you His Excellency Enrique Manalo, from the permanent representative of the Republic of the Philippines to the United Nations. And Ambassador has a long and distinguished career in the diplomatic service. And I notice, Ambassador, you were even in Ireland at one stage. So it is my honor to welcome you this morning and ask you to share remarks with us from your perspective in terms of being an ambassador at the United Nations and from your country perspective. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. Good morning, or good evening, and good afternoon, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. The Philippine Mission is pleased to co-sponsor this event with the Congregation of Our Lady of Charity of the Good Shepherd, the International Justice Mission, Man Up Campaign, and the Marinol Sisters. Online exploitation of children is a heinous crime that attacks the most vulnerable in our society. Children who have very little means to defend themselves and who rely on their families and the state for protection. It is a crime that happens in private, out of the public eye, and in the shadows of the internet. So our event today puts this issue under the spotlight in order to find ways to address it more effectively. Under Philippine laws, online sexual exploitation of children, or OSEC, is a form of human trafficking. To fight this crime, the government has established the Interagency Council Against Trafficking, or IACAT, which is chaired by the Department of Justice and the Department of Social Welfare and Development, and is also composed of other agencies whose mandate is related to combating human trafficking. This includes the Council for the Welfare of Children, as well as a non-government organization representing the sector of children. No less than a whole of society approach is needed to eradicate human trafficking in all its forms. NGOs and CSOs, including faith-based organizations, are important partners in the efforts to fight human trafficking, since these organizations usually have both grassroots and global reach. The Philippines has gained a level of success in combating human trafficking as it has maintained its Tier 1 ranking in the U.S. Department of State's TIP report for 5 years straight since 2016. This was achieved through relentless efforts to pursue the 4 Ps of trafficking: prevention through thousands of awareness campaigns, protection of victims and survivors, including provision of psychosocial services, persecution of offenders, and establishment of partnerships at the national, regional, and global levels to combat human trafficking. The COVID-19 pandemic, however, has posed new challenges in the fight against trafficking. More than a state of public health emergency in the Philippines, the pandemic has exposed the sad reality of the proliferation of online sexual exploitation of children. The landscape of commercial child sexual exploitation has shifted with the pandemic and the upsurge of digital technologies. Traffickers and criminals have used the pandemic as a business opportunity and expanded their operations through the internet, social media, and sites like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and similar platforms, which have made children more reachable for traffickers and more vulnerable to become victims of online exploitation. Measures put in place by government authorities to contain the spread of COVID-19 have also propelled children to resort to virtual modes of learning and leisure, and therefore increase their risk of being exploited. The Department of Justice Office of Cybercrime reported that there was a 264% increase in the number of cyber tip line referrals made by the US-based National Center for Missing and Exploited Children from March to May 2020, or coinciding with the government-mandated lockdown in the Philippines. From March 1 to 24 May 2019, there were only 76,561 reports, compared to 279,166 reports received for the same period in 2020. For the whole of 2019, the Philippine Department of Justice received 400,000 cyber tip line referrals. In 2020, the number increased to 1.2 million. In response to these reports, the interagency committee I referred to earlier immediately marshaled its resources and brought together its member agencies and stakeholders to ensure a coordinated and calibrated response to combat online sexual exploitation of children, or OSEC, during the pandemic. The Philippine Internet Crimes Against Children Center conducted 58 operations, rescued 172 people, and arrested 35 suspects. The youngest victim rescued was a 2-year-old boy. In May 2020, the conviction of the American pedophile David Timothy Deacon was handed down by a trial court through online proceedings amidst the pandemic and despite many courts under lockdown. Deacon was sentenced to life imprisonment and was ordered to pay a 2 million peso fine for 3 counts of large-scale qualified trafficking. The Philippine interagencies remain vigilant against OSEC amidst the pandemic, but evidence gathering is not without its limitations. Surveillance by law enforcement is limited due to lack of technology to detect live-streamed sexual abuse. This is where we need social media platform managers and tech or internet providers to assist in blocking access or transmission of child sexual abuse content. We also need their partnership in making netizens aware of the OSEC phenomenon and creating pathways for reporting to authorities. In the Philippines, 1,343 or 1343 hotline is dedicated to receiving and responding to reports of human trafficking, including online sexual exploitation of children. I cannot overstress the importance of partnerships in combating all forms of human trafficking. In December 2020, the IACAT held the 6th Manila International Dialogue on Human Trafficking, where Philippine agencies, foreign embassies, international organizations, NGOs, CSOs, private businesses, and other stakeholders shared good practices, identified gaps, and explored innovative ways to combat human trafficking. While technology was identified as an instrument that traffickers use to execute their criminal acts, technology also has the power to enhance prevention measures and to facilitate the administration of justice against traffickers. We therefore call on the tech sector to collaborate with governments and commit to the fight against online sexual exploitation of children and other forms of human trafficking. Governments alone cannot end OSEC. In the same way that governments alone cannot end the pandemic. We need science and we need ICT, and we need to work together now. Thank you very much for this opportunity for me to present the position of the Philippine government. Thank you.
Your Excellency, thank you sincerely for this very comprehensive overview. And if I was to pick on any one point that you have said, and you mentioned many, including the leading role of the Philippines in the fight against human trafficking. And I think of your work in the third committee. So thank you very much for what you do at that level. But what I want to pick out is the necessity for partnership. And you have highlighted this partnership with everybody, a whole of society approach. So thank you very much for this very broad and comprehensive introduction. Thank you again, Ambassador. And so I will turn now to the former ambassador at large for combating trafficking in persons from Sweden. And Ambassador is currently the Swedish Minister for Health and Social Affairs. And it is my honor to ask him to share with us because he has a long experience of addressing this issue, both from the point of view of children and gender. And he is indeed a very dear friend to the global community with regard to the issue of violence against women in all its forms, but particularly in terms of trafficking and prostitution. And of course, we must address the issue of how children are abused. So with that, I hand over to you, Per Andersson Sunderson.
Thank you very, very much for that introduction. Madam Moderator, Excellencies, distinguished participants, every child is a person, the most valuable person in the world. A complete person with their own personality and emotions from day one. Children have rights, and it's our obligation to protect children and to defend their rights. In the last 10 years, online sexual abuse has increased enormously worldwide, from 1 million reports of child sexual abuse material in 2010 to, I think it was just said, 21 million in 2020. And during COVID, reports show a further increase in online sexual abuse globally. Abusers are using our most modern technology to commit some of the worst crimes we know. Children spend twice as much time online now as they did 10 years ago. And the old warning, don't talk to persons you don't know, has lost its power. In online chats, strangers come disguised as teenagers. A kind word can be hard to resist, especially to vulnerable, disadvantaged children who already have problems at home. The terrible fact is that most of the children already know their abusers, even live with them. Their pictures end up on the internet. Pedophiles meet each other in dark corners of internet in closed groups to trade tips and tricks and boast about their crimes. And the price of admission to these groups is new, unseen child sex abuse material. This fuels demand, it fuels abuse. The more viewers there are, the more abuse will be committed. Behind every picture and every video, the real child is suffering. The importance of prevention cannot be overstated. We must tackle the root causes of sexual crimes against children. And we also need to protection and prosecution. We must enforce our laws when they are broken. For this, we need to have companies on board. Offenders use their system to exchange material and to target children. Abusers exchange photos and videos across countries and continents. So we must work together between countries and across borders to catch them and to prosecute them and put them in jail. Like I said before, abusers are using our most modern technology to commit some of the worst crimes we know. We must also use the most modern technology. Skillful use of information technology and artificial intelligence is the key to success. And I believe we will hear some very good examples during this side event. I'm going to give you one example. Well, first of all, the Swedish government combating violence against children and sexual exploitation of children is one of the most highly prioritized issues for the Swedish government. And the government works with these issues in many different ways. One way is to also give financial support to several civil society organizations who are working to stop sexual exploitation of children. One of these organizations is ECPAT. And I therefore want to share one example of a tool that has totally revolutionized the work for ECPAT in Sweden. As you all probably know, ECPAT's mandate is to end the sexual exploitation of children through prostitution, trafficking online, and in travel and in tourism sector. And there are more than 120 ECPAT members in 100+ countries across all regions of the world. ECPAT Sweden focuses most of its resources on operating a web-based hotline to which public anonymously can report suspected child sexual exploitation. I'm talking about pictures, video sequences, and suspected trafficking of children for sexual exploitation. The purpose is to find the child that's being exploited and help her or him. Another purpose is to erase the images from internet. And ECPAT Sweden has, for the last 5-6 years, received somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 anonymous tip-offs annually. ECPAT views every tip-off. More than 30% of the tip-offs were relevant. The non-relevant were mainly tip-off of legal adult material or tip-offs where the picture was already deleted from internet. ECPAT reports every relevant tip-off to the police and to Interpol if there's a suspicion that the image were not produced in Sweden. The method with the hotline requires people to contact ECPAT, but thanks to modern information technology and artificial intelligence, ECPAT Sweden now have much more efficient methods to find images of children being exploited. 2018, ECPAT joined a project run by a Canadian Centre for Child Protection called Project Arachnid. Project Arachnid is an innovative tool to combat the growing proliferation of child sexual abuse material on the internet. And this Project Arachnid platform was initially designed to crawl links on sites previously reported to CyberTip Canada that contained child sexual abuse material and detect where these images were being made publicly available. Once child sexual abuse material was detected, a notice was sent to the provider hosting the content requesting its removal. This project still carries out the crawling activities described above, but it's continually evolving, adapting to enhance the possibilities to detect child sexual abuse material. For example, Shield by Project Arachnid has been developed for use by electronic service providers to accelerate the detection of this harmful material, those facilitating speedy removal. As of February 1st, 2021, the project has globally these results: 126 billion images processed, 32.1 million plus images triggered for analyst review, 6.6 million notices sent to providers, 85% of the notices issued related to victims who are not known to have been identified by police. This project finds approximately 100,000 unique pictures every month that needs to be viewed by an analyst. During 2019, ECPAT Sweden was directly responsible for the removal of 140,923 images or movies in this project, a number that can be compared to the old method where people had to contact the hotline and approximately 1,300 images per year were deleted. Let me just very briefly also share with you some news from the EU Commission regarding combating child sexual abuse in the European Union, which Sweden is very aligned with. The Swedish Commissioner Ylva Johansson, the EU Commission Home Affairs, has repeatedly stated that the fight against child sexual abuse is her #1 priority in the Commission, as a commissioner. And last year, she presented an EU strategy for more effective fight against child sex abuse, which includes sexual exploitation of children online. Commissioner Johnson has also stated that long-term solutions to counter the potential growth in child sexual abuse online is needed immediately. She has proposed a stronger mandate for Europol, who are essential in the fight against child sexual abuse in Europe. She wants companies to be able to send Europol reports of child sexual abuse directly, so Europol can analyze the reports and alert the member states in question. She's also considering making it mandatory for companies to detect and report known child sexual abuse materials to public authorities. Voluntary reporting is good, but not good enough. A lot of sexual abuse goes undetected. She's also considering setting up a European Center to prevent and counter child sexual abuse. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in the United States is a very important ally, but she thinks that we need our own center now in Europe. And she has just recently launched a public consultation asking law enforcement and everyone else for help. She's asking, what more can we do to fight child sexual abuse online? What more can we do to do it more effectively? And this consultation is open from the 11th of February to the 15th of April this year. And if you want to contribute, please visit the EU Commission web. Madam Moderator, I'm going to conclude my intervention by repeating myself. Online sexual exploitation of children knows no borders. It's a global crime and no country can fight this alone. As already been stated, we need to cooperate. International cooperation is more important than ever. States, civil society, and businesses must continue working together. Otherwise, we'll be totally run over by organized crime and pedophiles. Thank you very much for organizing this event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And again, thank you for highlighting not just what is done in Sweden and has been done for many, many years in Sweden, but highlighting what has been happening in Europe. In actual fact, this is news to me. And in terms of the opportunity to contribute to the consultation, thank you very much for that. I'm sure everybody on the call will want to follow up on that. Again, you echo the need for participation and collaboration, but I did hear very strongly a call to it being mandatory. It's no longer voluntary. So thank you very much for sharing that and for your wisdom and for your dedication. And also thank you for the shout out to ECPAT. They are an organization known to all of us who do tremendous work. So thank you again. Thank you. With that, we turn now to Abby Gilligan. And Abby is working at the Home Office in the United Kingdom. And she's going to share with us the efforts there to have an online safety bill with regard to a code of practice with regard to internet companies. And Abby has over 5 years of experience in online child safety, having previously worked with the charity sector. So Abby, the floor is yours, and thank you very much for being with us this morning. This afternoon, of course, in the UK.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're dialing in from. And thank you very much to the Mary Knowles Sisters for putting on this event and inviting the Home Office to be part of it. As we all know, and as we've heard this morning, technology companies have played a key role in creating the issue that we're here to talk about today. This isn't anything new, but the way that it kind of manifests online is devastating. And so it is vital that we talk not just about what tech companies have done to create the issue, but also what they can do to be part of the solution. And in the UK, we are currently preparing for new legislation, as was mentioned there, the Online Safety Bill. And this is about putting new requirements on companies to do what they should to be tackling this issue that matters so much to all of us and to so many children around the world. I'm just going to share my slides with you to keep me on track. Can I get a couple of thumbs up to just know that you can see that? Great. Okay, so the Home Office and the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport, which is another department that we're working closely with on this legislation, initially set out our plans for new regulation to tackle both illegal and legal but harmful online content and activity in April 2019 in the Online Harms White Paper. There was a public consultation on these initial proposals, which government responded to initially in the initial response in February 2020, and then in greater detail, the government responded in the full government response, which was published just before Christmas. And this sets out in detail our legislative proposals, and legislation will be introduced later this year to Parliament. So alongside the full government response that was published in December, we also published an interim code of practice for child sexual exploitation and abuse, what I'll refer to as CSEA. This interim code recognises the seriousness of this harm, and this is to provide companies with guidance on steps they should take to tackle CSEA now, ahead of legislation coming into force. While legislation is coming, we are clear that companies should not wait for that. It is imperative that they do everything they can to protect their child users now. So this interim code provides aims and examples of good practice for tackling the full range of CSEA issues, including grooming, the live streaming of child sexual abuse, and the sharing of child sexual abuse material, or CSAM. And this interim code builds on the voluntary principles. So these voluntary principles to counter online CSEA were published in March 2020, and this was an international effort between the Five Eyes governments and tech companies. And if anyone isn't aware of those, I'll share a link to the voluntary principles in the chat after I've spoken, and I'd really recommend you taking a look at those. A number of companies have signed up, and our interim code kind of builds on the work done for those voluntary principles. So now just briefly to talk through the key elements of our proposed online safety bill. So the bill will introduce a new set of duties on in-scope companies to protect their users. And this will be through risk assessing their services to understand what the risk is and therefore what they need to do to respond to it. They'll have a duty to identify and remove priority illegal content, such as CSEA and terrorism. They'll also have a duty to tackle other types of harmful content that may not be illegal, such as misinformation or bullying. And they will also have a duty in all of this to prioritise the safety of children. This new legislation will apply to companies that have UK users, irrespective of where that company is based. And it will apply to companies that have user-generated content, so social media platforms, services that allow for interaction between users, and also to search engines. In the full government response, government also confirmed the decision to make Ofcom, who is the UK's communications regulator, responsible for regulating and enforcing these new duties. To do this, Ofcom will have a range of enforcement powers, which will include issuing fines for companies that fail to meet their duties of up to £18 million, or 10% of annual global turnover, whichever of those is highest. So these are really strong enforcement measures that the regulator will be able to take where companies are failing to meet their new duties. There are a couple of provisions within this bill that are specifically targeted at tackling CSEA, which I'll just briefly outline now. So the first of these is around the proactive identification of CSEA. So we know that online CSEA often occurs in private online channels away from public eye, which makes the reporting of other users that may see it nearly completely void of being useful because it's hidden from us. We can't see it. And so it's really important that tech companies are taking steps to identify this kind of content happening on their services. And we know that a lot of technology companies are already doing this. So they're using technologies such as hash matching tools, which enable them to identify known child abuse material that might be being shared privately on their services. So while it's great that a lot of companies are already taking these measures and implementing these automated technologies, we want to make sure that the regulator is able to require other companies that aren't doing enough to do more. We don't want to discourage companies that are doing this voluntarily, but be able to make sure that there is a kind of increase in standards across the board. So the regulator will have a power set out in legislation to require companies to use accurate automated technologies to proactively identify CSEA. And that power will be, they will be able to use that where certain tests are met. So where there is a prevalent and high level of harm and where it's proportionate and necessary to do so. Another key element of the legislation that is focused at tackling and preventing child sexual exploitation is around the reporting of CSEA. Ambassador Per Anders just set out EU plans to introduce something similar. So as I'm sure many of you on this call are aware, some countries around the world already have reporting requirements on companies. So for example, companies based in the US are required by law to report CSEA to NCMEC. In the UK, companies currently report on a voluntary basis to their local police force. So as part of the online safety bill, the UK government is considering introducing a new requirement on companies to report online CSEA that they identify on their service. This new requirement will be compatible with existing reporting requirements. So we're clear that companies that already report under existing reporting regimes, such as that in the US, will not have to report twice. That's obviously important for companies, but also for law enforcement who don't need to be receiving duplicate reports. And we're keeping a close eye on what the EU is doing, and we'll be keen to make sure that we're working together to create a system that works across our borders. So that's everything from me. I don't think we're taking questions now, but I look forward to hearing any questions that you may have. And thank you again for having me and for listening to that short presentation.
Thank you very much, Abby. And if I can say, the conversation has been brought on a step further by actually looking at enforcement procedures. And I think this is very important, not just that they're mandatory, but there's also a way to hold people to account. So thank you very much for sharing this. And so that we have time for questions, I'll just move on to the next presenter, who is Mr. John Tangaho, who is the director of the International Justice Mission's Center to End Online Child Exploitation in the Philippines. And I think you can read more about John, but rather than waste time, I will ask him to take the floor immediately. John, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Winifred, and thank you for all the other excellent speakers. It's been great to hear about the work of governments to combat online sexual exploitation of children. I'm going to be sharing a little bit from the perspective of nonprofit organizations, but also definitely talking about the work of both governments and the technology sector, and how we can all work together to combat this crime. So I'm going to share my screen. So do let me know if you can see this PowerPoint.
Yes.
So I'm going to be focusing on the live streaming of child sexual exploitation. And the reason I'm focusing on that is because IJAM has been working in the Philippines in partnership with the Philippine government and international law enforcement and other NGOs to combat this form of online sexual exploitation of children. And we believe that it is one of the most harmful and most urgent forms of online CSEA to combat, because it often involves the ongoing and repeated sexual abuse of very young children for the financial profit of traffickers and for the perverse pleasure of sex offenders around the world. This is a technology-enabled crime, and so it does require a technology-based solution as part of the efforts to stop it. So it's been my pleasure to serve with IJM for close to 6.5 years here in the Philippines, and just last year we launched our Center to End Online Sexual Exploitation of Children. This is part of our global mission to protect people from violence. And so just quickly about IJM, we are a global organization working around the world, and we partner with governments, we partner with NGOs and law enforcement to protect people in poverty from violence. And we do that by coming alongside justice systems in supporting capacity building efforts, and really to strengthen frontline justice agencies so they can rescue victims, bring criminals to justice, restore survivors through aftercare and rehabilitation, and help local law enforcement build a sustainable, safe future for those who are vulnerable in their communities. When we talk about online sexual exploitation of children, IJM in the Philippines has been focused on protecting children who are exploited by traffickers to create new child sexual exploitation material, especially via live streaming. And this is to satisfy the online demand of child sex offenders around the world. This is a form of human trafficking. It is a form of modern slavery where oftentimes very young children, close to half of them are 12 years old or younger, are in the care and custody of a trafficker who is either a family member or a neighbor or a close family friend, and they are sexually abused repeatedly in live streams for paying sex offenders around the world. And so it is one form of online CSEA. Others, are the grooming or manipulation of children directly by offenders, or the distribution of child sexual exploitation materials. But IJM believes that this form of OSEC, the trafficking of children to create constantly new material, especially via live streaming, is one of the most urgent forms of online CSEA that we need to combat. And at the same time, it is one of the hardest to detect. And it is one where we need increasing solutions coming from the technology sector and to really combat this. And so I am encouraged to hear from the CEO and co-founder of Safe2Net in a few minutes, who will share about a technology innovation that they are developing. But just briefly, when we talk about OSEC and that it's a global crime, what does that mean? What does it mean that it's happening on tech platforms? Well, this will just show you the continuum of the crime on tech and financial sector platforms. It starts in social media or social networking, where offenders connect with one another. And demand-side child sex offenders who are looking to direct and view the sexual abuse of children in live streaming, they are connecting with traffickers who are seeking to abuse children online for a purely profit motivation. They want to make easy money. And so these two groups of offenders are looking for one another. And they are finding each other increasingly on social media platforms where they can connect and network with one another. Then once they meet each other, they move to some form of text communication. It's increasingly online on apps that allow people to connect around the world using the internet. And so we know that there are hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of different apps that people can use to communicate, text communicate, chat with one another. And that's where the traffickers and these remote sex offenders negotiate. This is where the trafficker says what he or she is willing to do to children live and how much they want the offender to pay for it. This is where the offender says what he wants to see done to very young children live for his sexual pleasure. and they negotiate in text communication that can be detected by platforms who are using artificial intelligence or other tools meant to detect those types of communications. And then once they've come up with the transaction, how it will happen and how much will be paid, then the money is wired through any number of money transfer agencies around the world that allow people from around the world to easily quickly send money from the UK, Sweden, the US, to the Philippines or any other country in the global South. And so it's often happening through money transfer agencies. It's not really in terms of what we've seen in the Philippines happening through cryptocurrency or really sophisticated means of transferring money, but it's just through simple money transfer agencies that any of us could use any day to send money to family or friends, or for e-commerce or other things like that. Then once the payment has been made, they move to now a video chat or live streaming application. Again, this is not anything fancy. This is a video call. This is platforms like the one we are using right now. And again, there's hundreds of them. And as Abby mentioned, they are, generally speaking, private video calls. And so again, this is where we need to see technology catch up to the modus operandi of offenders, because right now it is open season. There is impunity on live streaming applications where children's sexual abuse is being recorded and live streamed and shared for offenders around the world. Now, like I said, the global urgency is needed. I'm just sharing a few statistics here just to give you a snapshot for how large this problem is. Last year, the Australian government conducted research on sex offenders who were convicted and found that 39% of convicted sex offenders in their country never actually spent a day in prison. Germany had one investigation involving 30,000 suspects. The UK, the National Crime Agency, estimates that there are 300,000 UK sex offenders who pose a threat to children. Coming out of Australia, research was conducted on 256 known demand-side sex offenders, and they spent over 1.3 million Australian dollars to commission and direct the live streaming of child sexual abuse of young Filipino children. And then we have this estimate that there are 13% of all internet video traffic by this year will be live streaming. And so that just gives you a sense for how large this problem is and how critical it is that we have effective technology to combat this crime. These statistics show the impact of COVID, and I won't linger on them because the previous presenters have talked about them, but I'll just point out that NCMEC analysts have said that the live streaming of child sexual abuse was one of the primary contributors to this 31% increase that we saw last year in cyber tips. We know that offenders can record the live streaming, they can take snapshots of it, and they can share that on themselves. And so we know that live streaming, because it is primarily undetected, is an easy way for offenders to produce new child sexual abuse materials. So why does improved detection and reporting matter? Well, something you may not realize is the world just doesn't have really good data on the prevalence of live stream child sexual abuse. We don't know, for example, how many of those 20 million cyber tips from last year have to do with live streaming. We don't know how many children in the Philippines or in the global South and other countries are being abused in this way. We don't know the prevalence of this crime. And I think that makes it difficult for governments around the world to know the scope of the problem in their country and how much resources it will take to combat it. And so we urgently need collaboration between governments, NGOs, tech, and financial sectors to not only detect this crime and report it, but also to segregate data by country so that we can understand where are the hotspots for this crime, where are the emerging hotspots for this crime, and then what evidence-based interventions actually protect children, actually reduce the prevalence of this crime in a specific geographic location. But the other reason that improved detection and reporting matters is for timely rescue and law enforcement intervention. IJM's study, we conducted a study that we released last year in partnership with international law enforcement and NCMEC and other credible international organizations. And we found that in the Philippines, victims were abused on average for 2 years before they were rescued. And so lack of detection means lack of reporting, specifically for live streaming child sexual abuse. And it means that children suffer needlessly for years before the abuse is identified and they're able to be rescued. So imagine technology solutions, financial sector collaboration and reporting that identifies victims days or weeks after they're abused instead of years. That matters to those victims who are being sexually abused and exploited. And that's why we need improved detection and reporting. And so how can tech companies improve detection and reporting? Use the latest artificial intelligence innovations and tools to proactively detect child sexual abuse that's happening on platforms around the world. And I think the key word here is proactive, right? You can't wait for someone to file a report. You have to be using AI to proactively detect this crime. And then use tools that can actually block it. We know that law enforcement around the world is overwhelmed by the number of CSAM reports. And so we actually need to stem the tide of the production of child sexual exploitation materials, and then report all available information that's allowed by law, not only the amount of information that's required or not only the amount of information that's easily at the fingertips, but report all the information because you never know what will be helpful to law enforcement. And then, of course, what governments can do. IJM is incredibly encouraged by the reports and the movement of the UK government to really set clear guidelines and accountability mechanisms for tech companies. We know that there are some tech companies who are doing a really good job voluntarily, but the response has been uneven. And there are many tech companies that are doing almost nothing, and certainly not doing what's required of them to protect children. And so just imagine how serious this crime is, and then think about how governments normally respond to public safety issues. So could we imagine governments asking the tobacco industry to voluntarily not market their product to children? Could we imagine governments asking car manufacturers to voluntarily install seatbelts? We would just think that that is just silly. Governments should have clear expectations, clear guidelines to level the playing field across industry to protect children all on the internet, not just on one or two platforms. And then accountability mechanisms, because we know that that will lead to an even and more effective response across the sector. If we want to end online sexual exploitation of children globally, we must end impunity. And so that means that governments have to take a lead role in ensuring that offenders are identified and are held accountable. And at the same time, the technology sector and the financial sector has to do a significantly improved job of detecting this crime, which will actually support governments in gathering the data that they need to measure prevalence and in surfacing cases that are happening on hidden video calls, hidden text messages around the world on the internet every day. And so we have to end impunity for this crime. And if we end impunity, then we will protect children. So I'm going to end there. You can follow IJM Center on LinkedIn to learn more about the work that we're doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, John, for this very comprehensive overview, showing both how simply it happens and how complex the problem is. And I think you have ended with saying no impunity. And I think that's very important. And added to that, I think you confirm the term, the digital hunting field. And this is just so alarming. So thank you again. And without any more time, we will move on to our next presenter, who is Father Shay Cullen. Now, I did see a note to see that maybe he's not online. Marvy, can you confirm that or not?
Yeah, I don't see him here. So I think we move to Mr. Percy for the next speaker. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Marvy. So we will move to Mr. Richard Percy, who is Executive Chairman of SafeToNet. And I think this will also contribute to the overall view that we are getting in terms of this very heinous crime that is committed against the most vulnerable of people's children. So Richard, you have the floor.
Well, thank you, Madam Moderator, and hello, everyone. And thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity today to both highlight and demonstrate technology that genuinely has the potential to change the online world, making it safer for children to interact and explore online without fear of predation or threat. This technology, we believe, is groundbreaking, but it needs a collaborative effort, as so many of the previous speakers have mentioned, from both government and industry to both perfect it and deploy it. So hence my presentation. Of course, the power of collaboration can be extraordinary. Let me give you an example. Right now, the world is working together on an unprecedented scale. It is tackling COVID with formidable force and energy. Vast numbers of scientists are working around the world sequencing the virus's genome, learning how it mutates and spreads. Their research is available online, allowing all virus trackers and scientists to intensify their fight. It's urgent, it's very, very urgent. They share their research, their findings, and crucially, their data. And this sense of collaboration and openness has allowed those brilliant scientists to develop vaccines in less than a year. And crucially, this has not required legislation to make it happen. So you have to ask yourself, why doesn't that same collaborative verve and drive exist when tackling online harms? UNICEF estimates there are over 750 million children online. They're vulnerable because they're naive and easy to trick. Indeed, over a third have seen violent and sexual content. Well, that's more than 225 million children. That's over twice the amount of people that currently have COVID in the world. So there can be no doubt, can there, that online harms is a significant global issue. But I fear that the problem is that common purpose just does not exist when tackling online harms. The world isn't pulling together, it isn't acting as one. Manufacturers of devices, telcos, and online platforms are simply not designed with safety in mind. Dollars, yes, but safety, no. Their commercial interests do not align with keeping children safe online. And the forthcoming legislation that Abby so eloquently described from the UK government must be warmly welcomed and championed, but of course it's going to take some time before it's enacted. So there is no time to lose, so we must shift the narrative, now using technology and market dynamics to change the landscape so that commercial interests do finally align. And we can do this by giving parents a choice when they buy a phone for their child. If it doesn't have safety technology embedded on it, don't buy it. You can bet your last dollar that the manufacturers and the telcos will soon change their tune when their business dries up. The common denominator to online harms is, of course, the device itself. If there was no device, then it couldn't be filmed, it couldn't be streamed, and it couldn't be consumed. I tend to regard smartphones as the most dangerous weapon known to man. They don't come with a safety catch. They're locked and loaded the moment they are in a child's hands. Children can see, hear, say, and do anything, and they're susceptible to predation and harm the moment they switch that phone on. But I'm delighted to tell you that we can change all of that. John was using the word imagine a lot. So imagine technology that ensures a phone is safe out of the box, a laptop is safe out the box, a tablet is safe out the box. Imagine a world where harmful videos, images, audio and text are filtered in real time and before any harm is done. And imagine if that technology was available today. Well, I'm excited to tell you that it is available and it's undergoing alpha trials right now. In a few seconds, I will play you a video of Safe to Watch. Safe to Watch is pioneering technology developed by SafetyNet's data scientists. Not medical scientists, of course, but scientists that can still deliver the same life-changing impact as a pandemic vaccine. Safe to Watch uses artificial intelligence to contextualize activity on a child's device and filters harmful content before it's seen, filters it. It can prevent both the consumption and the production of violent and sexual content in live stream video in the moment as it happens. So imagine that for a second. A child can no longer be coerced into performing sexual acts to camera. The device will block it, it will stop it. And the software does all of this running on the device without the need of the cloud. And that's really crucial because an element of the online safeguarding space requires and demands that children have rights to privacy. Cloud-based technology is notoriously flawed when it comes to giving privacy. So Safe to Watch can run on any device, including smartphones, tablets, and laptops. It can detect bullying, issues of low self-esteem, and even dark thoughts. These are, of course, a consequence commonly of online harms. The technology can be embedded in games, social networks, messaging apps, and chat rooms. So I'm just about to share my screen. I do hope this works. Please let me know if you can see my screen. I might run a technology company, but I am technically quite inept. Can you see that? You can. So this is only a short video. Sadly, we don't have time for me to demonstrate everything that I'd like to show you, but hopefully this will give you an idea of Safe to Watch.
Welcome to Safe to Watch, SafetyNet's live stream threat detection and filtering software. Currently in alpha testing, the software will be ready for market release in June of this year. Safe to Watch operates in real time on the device. It is not using the cloud and is both memory and battery efficient. It stops the generation and consumption of sexual and violent video in the moment as it is live streamed or filmed using the camera on the device. As soon as the software detects harmful content, it hashes the image, rendering it harmless. Safe to Watch currently detects threats of nudity and violence and will be trained further to identify other threats, including gore, weaponry, and extreme violence. This demonstration shows Safe to Watch running on a smartphone and as the child uses Snap and TikTok. Note the software is application agnostic and so will work on any app running on the device. In this first example, the software is running on Snap and it prevents the child from filming two boys fighting. It renders the video useless by hashing the harmful content. As soon as the fighting stops, notice how the hashing is automatically removed. This feature helps to prevent bullying and the shaming of children online. In this second example, Safe to Watch is stopping the child from filming nudity within TikTok. Note how the software automatically hashes those elements of the imagery that carry risk and so prevents sexting and sextortion. Again, the video is rendered harmless and has safeguarded the child in real time and in the moment.
So there you have it. don't let anyone try and convince you that the technology doesn't exist or could not exist to tackle these problems, because it simply can, and you've just seen that. The accuracy of Safe to Watch is improving all the time as we increasingly feed it more training data. It is, after all, only as good as the way you train it. But it still needs much more of that training data to improve its efficacy and to safeguard children more effectively. And as such, we want to collaborate with anyone that has access to sensitive data and harmful content, including video, imagery, and text, and who would like to join forces with SafetyNet to further train the algorithms. We know that data is held by governments, security agencies, NGOs, and of course the platforms. Please work with us now and contact me after this conference if you can, and if you'd like to know more. We also seek support from anyone that can help us deploy this technology to the masses. Online safety is surely a basic and fundamental human right. It shouldn't be down to the size of your bank balance as to whether you can safeguard your children online. It must be equitable, it must be available to all, and we need your help to distribute technology like this and of course to perfect it. So finally, and in summary, SafetyNet is going to make Safe to Watch available for others to integrate into their platforms and hardware. I'm calling all handset manufacturers, telcos, social networks, gaming apps, chat rooms, live stream video platforms like Zoom, the one that we're using now. Your legal duty to safeguard children is nigh, but your moral duty is now. The sooner we collaborate, the sooner this technology can be deployed to the masses. Let's work together now, and if we do so, who knows, within a year, we could have a universal vaccine to online harms. Thank you so much for giving me the time to present to you.
Thank you very much, Richard. And it's certainly heartening to realise that technology is on the verge of helping children who are so vulnerable to being exploited. And indeed, it is our moral duty. And thank you for pioneering this particular way of saving children and of dealing with abuse that is online, which is available to everybody, but that your technique will help block it and in that way safeguard children. Thank you again. Marvi, are we going to move ahead with the next video, or will we move into
Yes.
Question and answer?
Yes, we will move to the next video, Microsoft video.
Okay. This video is being presented by Jacqueline Boucher, and Jacqueline is with Microsoft, and her campaigns include Digital Civility Campaign and Council for Dignity Good. And as I said, she represents Microsoft in We Protect Global Alliance in Hope. And she prepared a video to share at this webinar.
Minimize that screen. Yeah. Hello, and it's a pleasure to be with you here today. My name is Jacqueline Boucher, and I am the Global Digital Safety Advocate at Microsoft based in Redmond, Washington. I'd like to share with you just a few pieces of information today about our child online protection work at Microsoft in particular. And I think always the first place to start is, what do we talk about and what are we talking about when we're talking about safety online, digital safety, online safety? So it's basically about helping people maximize their desirable online experiences and minimize those associated with what I call the 4 C's: content, contact, conduct, and commerce. In and of themselves, pretty innocuous, but when we're talking about illegal content or inappropriate contact or illegitimate commerce, we're operating in the online safety or the digital safety space. I'm sure everyone understands when I talk about the 4 C's or the 4 C's of online risks. I just want to point out here contact and conduct. They are basically 2 sides of the same coin. So from a contact perspective, we're looking at things from the target's perspective, that person who is being zeroed in on for bullying or stalking or harassment or grooming. And on the other side of the coin, conduct is looking at things from the perpetrator's perspective, the person who is exhibiting those bullying or harassing or predatory behaviors. At Microsoft, we're mostly focused on content and contact. So in terms of digital safety and our approach to digital safety, it really is a 4-part approach and strategy that we have. We work on internal governance, so policies and standards and procedures to make sure that we are equipping our products and our services with features and functionality that put safety at top of mind. We're trying to innovate and we're trying to invest in new technologies and new techniques to make sure that we're empowering users as well so that they have the tools and resources to best protect themselves online. We collaborate with others, we partner with others, whether it be industry or government or civil society, to make sure that we are approaching these issues like child online protection in a whole of society manner. And then finally, there's so much to be said for awareness raising and education of the general public about these issues. And Microsoft has 2 websites that I would direct you to, Microsoft.com/saferonline, where you'll find a bevy of resources available for consumers, and also Microsoft.com/digital civility, which I'll talk about a little bit later. It's a campaign that we've now had in place for about 5 years. So when it comes to child sexual exploitation and abuse imagery specifically, Microsoft has been at this for quite some time. It was back in 2003 that we were approached by a detective from the Toronto Police Department named Paul Gillespie. He contacted our then CEO, Bill Gates, and wanted help from technology to help him track down perpetrators of child sexual exploitation and abuse imagery. Following that meeting, Microsoft responded with, at the time, was a $1 million investment and the creation of a technology that is still in use today by some law enforcement agencies around the world. Fast forward to 2009, Microsoft created and donated to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children photo DNA robust hash matching technology. And it's been used now around the world by a number of organizations to help organizations detect, identify, and report known child sexual exploitation and abuse imagery. Fast forward to 2018, as you can see, this is very much a calendar and a timeline of some of our efforts, but I just want to highlight a few things in the short time that I have today. In 2018, we conducted a hackathon in November of that year, and we held an event around really looking at and combating child online grooming for sexual purposes. This hackathon was not your typical hackathon where engineers and technologists get together to develop technology to track a particular problem or to attack a particular problem. Instead, this was what I called a 360-degree hackathon, where we also had teams dedicated to the operational component, the policy component, the legal component, and of course, the technical component of child online grooming for sexual purposes. And less than just over a year later, in January of 2020, we announced, along with a number of other companies, that we had created a prototype and a tool or a technique to help individual companies and others detect indicia of child online grooming for sexual purposes. And I'd like to give you just a little bit more about that technique so that you understand what its purpose is and who can potentially use it. Basically, it looks at historical text-based chat or message conversations. And when I say historical, I mean non-real time. These are written text conversations happening potentially between a child and adult about something of a sexual nature. The algorithm looks for certain what we call regular expressions, or regex, that would be indicative of this kind of a conversation. For instance, is it about something of a sexual nature? Could there be an age discrepancy detected between the two parties to the conversation? Is there a request by one of the parties to move to maybe a more private platform? And at the end of this, once these algorithms are applied, a risk score is generated for each of them. And it can allow the company that's looking at this conversation to determine, based on that risk score, if the conversation itself needs to be looked at with human eyes. So why did we do this? Basically, we want to protect our customers, we want to protect the integrity of our services, and we want to rid our platforms of these types of actors and these types of people in our communities. And of course, we want to report those individuals to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And finally, I think I gave you an idea of how it works, but just to go through this slide briefly, Microsoft does have a patented technology about this type of a technique. And we were building off of that patent and working with some other companies in the field to create a more robust approach to this kind of technique. Again, historical, so non-real time, text-based chat conversations. The evaluation, the rating of those individual series of characteristics by the algorithm takes place, and then that rating can be used as the determiner by the individual company to see if the conversation needs to be sent to a human for review. Apart from that, if it is sent on to a human for review, all of this is taking place on an automated basis. So I just want to share with you briefly, because of where we are in February, about our public awareness raising efforts, and particularly our campaign for digital civility. As I said, this is something that we've been doing for 5 years now at Microsoft, and our latest survey, which was just released on February the 9th in conjunction with International Safer Internet Day, looked at responses from individuals in 32 countries. We've had a steady progression of how many countries have participated over the course of the 5 years. We've been surveying teens and adults in this variety of countries for 5 years now, asking them about their exposure to a number of different online risks. And they fall into basically 4 categories: behavioral, sexual, reputational, and personal and intrusive. So we just reported last Tuesday that the Digital Civility Index for the globe improved 3 percentage points since 2019. These are 2020 data that we then share on Safer Internet Day the following year. And this was basically due to an explosion in online activity due to the stay-at-home COVID-19 environment. You'll see that the index actually declined, which means fewer people are reporting that they were exposed to online risk in the period. So the index itself works like a golf score. You actually want a lower reading on the index, which would indicate a lower percentage of individuals in that country or globally being exposed to risk, and thus a more perceived civil online environment in that geography. So just to share as a few highlights as well, and perhaps a few lowlights, unfortunately, it's those risks that sow hate and division that are at 5-year highs. So being exposed or falling victim to hoaxes, scams, and fraud, hate speech and being exposed to hate speech, having fallen victim to discrimination online. These are all risks that are at 5-year highs for this research. And because of the timing of the research, it was fielded in April and May of 2020, when much of the world was really coming to grips with the stay-at-home COVID-19 environment. And what we found was a number of individuals said that civility actually improved online due to COVID. They thought that more people were seen online as being helpful to one another. They were expressing a greater sense of community. They had this feeling that we're all in this together, and they were coming together online to deal with the crisis. That said, there were also a number of individuals who felt that COVID had actually negatively impacted civility online, where an increased spread of false or misleading information was the primary motivator, or people were frustrated by their stay-at-home conditions and they were taking out those frustrations on others online. They also thought that some people were becoming more tolerant online and they were becoming more verbal in their attacks and negative comments toward others online. All of this information, as I said, is available at microsoft.com/digital civility, and also again look to the Safer Online website for some additional material. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the event.
Thank you, Marvi, for showing that particular video clip based on the work of Jacqueline Boucher. And indeed, it has contributed to the overall conversation. And it is helpful to know that the tech companies, the big companies, are also concerned about this issue. So I hand over to you, Marvi, to introduce our youth representatives.
So thank you, Winifred. I'd like to go over to our two youth representatives, two youth advocates, Jamie Gall. Fred, if you could put the pin, Jamie and Madeline. Jamie is the current senior at Friends Seminary and will be attending Northwestern University in the fall. She represented the Man Up campaign in the student working group and began working with the Man Up campaign as an intern this past spring. Madeline is 13 years old and has been attending middle school 100% online since the middle of March. She balances with her synchronized ice skating and piano. She's the Man Up campaign student working group member and volunteers with the local neighborhood association. So we call on Madeline and Jamie to present to us the policy recommendations from this event. And then we will follow shortly with a short interaction from our participants. Thank you. Jamie?
We call on member states to mainstream internet child protection laws and national and subnational policies that address online sexual exploitation of children in all levels of government, public, and private sectors.
Strengthen specialized anti-trafficking law and enforcement and court prosecution by increasing their budget and personnel, by supporting child protective prosecutions to avoid re-traumatization.
Increase collaboration with international law enforcement agencies working on anti-trafficking and on cases of online sexual exploitation of children.
Ensure that holistic and trauma-informed recovery services, including physical and mental well-being, are provided for child victims.
Provide capacity building and education in a school-based setting that empowers children and adult guardians to fight against the online sexual exploitation of children.
Prosecute enablers and perpetrators of online sexual exploitation of children, both in source and demand side countries.
That state agencies and governments pass legislation to require electronic and internet service providers to install filters and blocking software using artificial intelligence to block, filter, and intercept child sexual exploitation materials and live streaming of child sexual abuse, along with detection measures, including cross-industry data sharing to identify offenders. The international community must have power to monitor and support implementation.
That United Nations establish global internet governance and institutions that will create a global ethical internet policy, regulate and implement global internet agreements, and ensure unified data collection to issues such as online sexual exploitation of children.
Winifred, back to you. If you would like to ask, maybe we can have a couple of questions before we close. if you would like to ask some question, you can direct it to the chat, or you can raise your hands, so that we can ask our panelists. Okay, I don't see anybody raising their hands.
I don't know how to raise my hand.
Go ahead.
But there's no. I have a question. I would be interested. So now we heard about technology making it possible to prevent children from being exploited. But I don't have the feeling that there is a widespread use of this technology. Do the providers of this technology have an idea why it is not used so much or not known? Do they have any idea? Because then maybe it would be possible to improve the use of these technologies. Thank you.
So please go ahead, Richard, or anybody who would like to answer on that. I don't, maybe Richard, you would have, or any of the...
Yes. Well, thank you for the question. Of course, the emergence of artificial intelligence is fairly recent, and certainly the emergence of efficacious artificial intelligence is very recent. We've tackled this problem by looking at the lowest common denominator, which is the device itself. That's the handset or the tablet in particular. And fundamentally, those devices haven't had the processing power, the AI chips within them, to be able to do the work that our algorithms are now asking them to do. Maybe a phone that is 4 or 5 years old just won't have the power to analyze imagery in real time. So that's one of the challenges that we face as a young organization, as a young British tech company. It's these sorts of events that allows us, of course, to tell the world that technology like this exists. And so the more we can spread the word, then the more that we can work with others, and therefore ensure that this technology is embedded at source.
Thank you, Richard. Anybody else from other panel speakers? Would you like to add to Richard's?
I'm happy to briefly come in. It's Abby here. I think it's a great question. I think, as other panelists have highlighted, some of this technology is being used. Some tech providers are doing a really good job at proactively identifying and removing this kind of content. Microsoft talked through the measures that they have in place. There's a number of companies that have signed up to the voluntary principles, which I've shared in the side panel now. But it's really clear that not all companies are doing as much as they should be. And that's why we in the UK government are introducing this legislation that will enable us to require companies to implement this kind of technology, because until now it's been voluntary. And while some companies have taken up these technologies voluntarily, others haven't, and that's clearly not good enough. So I think we've shown over the last 20, 30 years that legislation is needed now.
Thank you, Abby. I'll call on Pacific Baguma. Pacific, you can ask your question.
Oh yes, thank you so much for letting me to participate through this great platform, and thank you for Mana for letting me be invited. I'm from Democratic Republic of Congo. Yes, I've been really hearing with much interest all the presentations I've got. I'm from the country which has been subject to wars and atrocities, such as violences. Really, there are some of the typical general activities in here, according to rebels and other matters. Now, you have been focusing on online exploitations of children, and here, as we are in pandemic, COVID-19, we are in undeveloped countries, and there are so many realities which are not in your countries there. I would like to also to give a given proposal to those speakers and to the UN to try to look for those movies. So those movies enterprises or those who are producers of movies, to know if they could have specific movies for kids. You know, during these lockdowns, our kids, they are staying home and they are watching some movies which are not appropriated to them. And there are some specific channels which they are displaying to the kids, and it's really hurts their moral. Second, it is about our TV shows. Our TV shows around the world, they should know those specific times to give a specific movie. This could be a great thing. Also about our journalists and those who are in social media. Here we have got a problem because so many images of killing people, raping people, sometimes they're displaying them to the pages of Facebook and so forth and so far in order to denunciate. But our kids also can fall on those pictures and movies, and this is really horrible. So this is my small contribution. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pacific. Okay, so anyone who would like to respond to Pacific on that? I think it's a good suggestion, Pacific. You know, to really divert attention of children to have their own movies. Okay. Winifred, I think we probably have to close because of time. There's another session that will be starting soon. Winifred, I give you the floor to close this session.
Thank you very much, Marvi, and to our distinguished panelists, excellencies, ambassadors, and panelists from a wide spectrum concerned with the internet and internet technology and safety on the internet. I want to thank you sincerely for sharing the depth of your experience with us and the depth of your knowledge. And I think everybody has contributed in such a way that we have now a very broad understanding of what is happening and how children are so vulnerable to being trafficked. And together with that, we also realize that we are on the cutting edge, if I can put it this way, of the development of technologies that can actually address this situation. And I kind of found one quote, we have to, in some senses, confront the dollars, the profit, and safety for everybody, taking those two concepts. And I think in our last mention with regard to COVID, COVID has revealed to us the fault lines that are existing in the global community and how the most vulnerable are exploited. And I think a lot of what I hear is calling us to try and think of a new paradigm for the world around sustainability, and care and solidarity. And without a doubt, the work of the panelists and their advocacy that we've heard this morning, and the work of governments across the world, but until every government, until every person is involved in this, can I say, no child is safe? So we need this new paradigm. And again, I think a lot of it hinges on gender-based violence and the continuance and the upsurge of gender-based violence. And when we think of women, we think of children, women and children. And now we're focusing in on children and the huge vulnerability that exists for them. So what can I say? Thank you very much for uniting with us to share this very important information during a significant commission this year in terms of the Commission for Social Development, which has focused in on the well-being, digital technologies and the well-being of all. And you have surely highlighted both the positive aspects of internet and internet technology and what is possible, and hoping to push that forward for the well-being of children. So to each and everyone who have attended and participated, at some stage, I think we were up to 60 participants. So thank you to each and every participant. Thank you to those who asked questions. And thank you again, dear panelists and eminent ambassadors and the groups who co-sponsored this. We are very grateful, and thank you to the Man Up campaign and to the Mary Nall sisters and to the International Justice Mission, and last but not least to the mission of the Philippines to the United Nations. We are very grateful to everybody, and this surely is collaboration at its zenith. And thank you very much, and thank you, Marvi, and have a good day, rest of the day, wherever you are in the world. Thank you, and bye-bye.
Of course, thank you, Winifred. We have to thank you and the wonderful facilitation of the panel. And we sure hope to follow this up in all other UN UN sessions. We have to bring the topic back all the time to the table. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.